if somebody was paying attention to this, maybe watching some of our coverage on this, you would have known that some of the plan that Trump produced was there was talks of it, but not to the exact extent that President Trump put forward here. So I really want to jump right in and see what President Trump said, because there was this big meeting, the first foreign meeting, the meeting with a foreign minister that the president had was with Bibi Netanyahu of Israel. There was this happening. Of course, he wasn't even inaugurated even a few weeks ago, and this is one of the first meetings Donald Trump has. And this is, of course, because President Trump has relied heavily on pro-Israel funding, and there is this gigantic Christian Zionist group within the Republican Party that is definitely trying to align us closer with Israel. So let's jump right in. What happened with this press conference that Donald Trump had? He announced something very big with Benjamin Netanyahu at this press conference. Let's listen in.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area. Do a real job, do something different. Just can't go back. If you go back, it's going to end up the same way it has for 100 years.
So off the bat, there's a lot of things there that are pretty confusing. It's very shocking. So in case anybody might be confused about what was said there, Donald Trump says that the United States will go in and annex the Gaza Strip. And a number of questions comes about from this. Firstly is, what happens to the 1.8 million Palestinians that are living in that area that has been completely devastated from the massive bombings that Israel has done to the region? There's other questions about, well, where is this funding going to come from to build this massive city, this massive industrial project? And other questions too about, like, well, when does the United States own this region? Do we own it now? Do we own it next week? When do we own it? Nobody. Those are all questions. Well, Donald Trump with Bibi Netanyahu then took questions from the press, and these questions were answered. Donald Trump gave us pretty clear answers to this. Firstly, he said, when asked about, well, where are these people going to go? He says they will be forcibly deported to the 1.8 million people, that's a lot of people, to either Egypt or Jordan. And effectively, he's just going to make it happen. Egypt and Jordan said, no way. Donald Trump says, well, I think this should happen. Then when asked, well, when the region is stabilized, when it's rebuilt, what's going to happen with the Palestinians that are relocated, that are displaced? He says, I don't think people should be going back. You can't live in Gaza right now. I think we need another location. I think it should be a location that's going to make people happy. He then was asked, well, will there be boots on the ground in the region? And he says, quite possibly, if we want that, if we think that's necessary, then it's going to happen. And of course that would happen, right? Because if the United States accepts a new territory into the Union, whether it's going to be a state or just going to be a territory, that is the United States land. And so the United States, of course, would have to protect the land, especially in this region. And so this was later clarified by Caroline Leavitt, who's the press secretary, who said, well, we didn't make a commitment to boots on the ground. But what's very clear is that the Palestinians are going to have to leave, and they're going to be forcibly deported. And the United States is going to take on ownership of the region and is going to build it up. Now, we'll get to, is that really Trump's plan? We'll get to that in a second. So really, if somebody has been paying attention, I mentioned earlier, you would know that some of these plans have already been in the works. They're very different, though. This was really a combination of two different plans. One was a plan that came out very near October 7th, after October 7th, I believe it was like October 30th or something like that, where much of the Israeli government was suggesting that all of the Palestinians simply just get removed from the area. This was expanded upon early last year, even from top generals and top officials in the Israeli government, saying that effectively the Israelis, the IDF, needs to go in, make a sweeping movement from the north to the south, and evict all of these people, just remove them from the area. And this was combined really with another plan. This is where the city comes in. This idea we're going to build, casinos and resorts on top of the rubble. This is from a plan called Gaza 2035, which was a sort of a leaked. It was released by Benjamin Netanyahu. It was reported in the Jerusalem Post about Israel's plan to annex the region, annex the Gaza Strip, and slowly make it into a sort of international zone of trade. So that those two plans were combined. The Gaza 2035 plan initially did not entail kicking out all of the Palestinians, but Donald Trump has seemed to say he's really throwing a wrench in things. He's saying, well, the United States is going to own the region, not Israel. And we're going to kick out all of the Palestinians, and we're going to make it into this super international city. There was the question of, well, who's going to live there? He mentioned international, the people of the world was the term he used. It seems very likely it will be people, the people from the Emirates, some Arabs, maybe some Palestinians would return, and mainly Israelis, though, that would be brought into the region. So why is this wanted? What's the play here? What's the end goal? Well, firstly, we need to look at the economic situation that's going on there. This attempt to make this zone into this mega international city is trying to incorporate and expand upon a plan introduced by the Biden administration, which has to do with the India, Middle East, Europe corridor, which is this idea of trying to reorient trade to be able to get goods from India through the Middle East to Western Europe seamlessly, without having to deal with Iran or having to go through China or Russia interfering with this as well, having to deal with Saudi Arabia, the chaos in the Red Sea. The plan is to make it so that this is seamless. They would make it so that this mega international city would be incorporated with that. Secondly, this should be a very obvious thing. Israel wants regional hegemony. It wants control over this region. This has been something that people have been called out for saying in the past, and it's sort of been a fringe idea. I think if anyone's denying that now, they're quite foolish. Israel, for its interests, wants to see itself be very powerful. It wants to be on the world stage. It wants to be a global superpower. So, is this a bad thing for the United States? Well, I think something that should be put into perspective here is that, well, what is the United States getting out of this? There's the obvious hypocritical thing when it comes to the America First message. We voted for getting out of the Middle East. No foreign wars, no forever wars, they called it. We wanted no intervention in the Middle East. We wanted to cut federal spending. And what we've seen in turn is concessions to Israel. By giving them more foreign aid. That was another concession that Donald Trump made to Benjamin Netanyahu, increasing the weapon shipments. And in addition to this, now we're sort of on cleanup duty. We're going in, even after Israel has ruined this part of the world, we're going in there having to clean it up. And either going through this very immoral thing of having to evict 1.8 million people out of their homes, and are we going to return them? Well, if we return them, that means United States tax dollars are going towards building housing for 1.8 million Palestinians in the region. So that would be bad. Or we're just doing this very immoral act of kicking these people out for the interests of Israel. So I think it's important to keep in mind when it comes to like the nationalist perspective, what the nationalist problem with this is, the America First problem with this would be that America seems to have lost any kind of sovereignty. This is obviously not our interest to be involved in this sort of region. This has to do with a mutual hatred between Israel and Palestine. Both of their goals are mutually exclusive. So you can't really, at this point, they hate each other so bad. Their interests are so far apart from each other that this is sort of inevitable. But the United States is having to force itself to be involved because of foreign influence, massive funding from Israeli PACs and various groups that is keeping our politicians chained to this. You also just have the mainstream media, which is chained to these sorts of ideas, not allowed to criticize any of these things. So the sovereignty seems to have been completely lost. And the final thing that, what I think some objections might be would be someone saying, well, this is just 4D chess. I've seen many people in the conservative commentariat bring this up, saying, well, Trump is just making the art of the deal here. He's trying to force the Arab countries to come to the table and do something else. But I think we have to question the morality of, firstly, making this what is effectively a to threaten war, which Catholic just war theory would say you can't even do that unless you have a just cause. And if we're putting United States troops there, risking being shot from Hamas soldiers, risking the casualties in the region, having to deal with all these bombs, having to deal with the animosity that's going to be created from all of the Arabs that are going to have to leave that region, losing their homes, having their homes stolen from them, that's not moral, even to make that for the art of the deal standpoint. But I think what's very important to note is that is not, I truly don't believe that this is some sort of ploy to try to bring those countries to the table. I think that's part of it. But I think that this is what Donald Trump wants. I think that goes completely along with Israel's interest and Israel's expressed interest in the region. And I think Donald Trump simply wants to get this done. I think it goes along with his agenda for supporting Israel in the region. And I think when we dig deep down, because I think some of our audience might be confused, why wouldn't you support Israel? Aren't they a United States ally? Well, Israel does not support, especially traditional Catholic ethics. Many of them despise Christians, especially Catholics. They aren't supporting our economic interests because, of course, this is a money pit for all of us. And really, if you look at the supporters of Israel in the modern times, you have to deal with Christian Zionists, heretics, who are saying that Israel are still the chosen people of God rather than the church being, which Jews can, of course, be a part of the church if they convert to Catholicism. But they certainly did not keep the old covenant in place. So I think this presents a number of problems. Many of the other stories we're going to be talking about today will add to this. But unfortunately, at the moment, Brian, I think is the first moment of the Donald Trump's administration that we can read in really a negative light. I don't think this is something we should be going forward with. I think this goes against Catholic just war theory. I think this displaces a lot of people, and I don't think this is in the interest of the United States. But what's your take on it, Brian?
Yeah, definitely agree with your analysis, but I want to add a couple little nuances to it. One, in terms of what's going on, I actually don't believe that people are saying this is 4D chess. He doesn't really want this. He wants, it's a threat for something else. I actually think he does want to do this because if you look at Donald Trump's entire career, this is how he got started. So his first major real estate project was Midtown Manhattan, Grand Central Station, which was a dive in the 70s, mid 70s. It was the horrible area. And then there was this hotel, I think it was called the Commodore or something like that. It was just this old hotel fallen into disrepair, homeless people everywhere. And he basically said, let's turn this into a luxury hotel. And everybody thought, oh, that's insane. This is a dump. And he said, no, the only way to bring back New York is to bring in, at that point, there are very few billionaires, but the hundreds of millionaires and have this luxury place, and that will, rise everything up. He then does the same thing with Trump Tower, is the next thing, right, to revitalize that area. So I actually think this is him. Like, everything you said is true, but I do think he really wants to do this. I think he wants to make it the Abu Dhabi, the Dubai of two of the Middle East for the super rich instead of having all these poor people here. So that's my first point. Second point, although I agree with you, I think the fact that he did this does have maybe an unintended consequence, but an unintended positive consequence. It shines a light on the fiction of the existing neocon globalist, UN NGO oligarchy. So first point, the Biden administration says, oh, don't worry, we'll fix up Gaza in 5 years. And I think when he says these people have to leave and and thrown out of their homes, he's saying what homes? Which is a legitimate point. The devastation. I mean, I don't think we even comprehend. The Israeli forces have just utterly obliterated the whole area there. And frankly, there aren't many homes for people to come back to. And there is no way the Biden administration's plan would ever fix this place. I mean, it will take 10 to 15 years. This is nothing we've ever seen in the United States. It's the level of the worst bombing of World War II, of Dresden, and I think his part of, again, a consequence of this is saying they just, lie to you. They just totally just destroy areas of the world, and out of nowhere we'll fix it. And it is, you know, there really is nothing for people to go home to. The second thing I think it exposes is the facade of the last 70 years in the Middle East. That the whole establishment community is, they're just sort of two fundamental principles. Israel gets total control and security, and the Palestinians, we need a two-state solution. And I think he's kind of getting what to say. They have just been perpetuating these contradictory principles forever because it just breeds never-ending conflict in the region, right? That the two-state solution and Israel's version of their security, what they mean by it, are utterly incompatible. And so I think the globalist community fed those things because they like having a nice, to use a phrase of President Polk, a splendid little war now and again. To, oh yeah, we just poke the Middle East and stir this up again because we're just going to keep these these sort of explosive situations next to each other. And I think, again, maybe an unintended consequence of this is he's like, this is never going to work. Now, is everything you said about the immorality of the way he wants to fix it is problematic, but he's sort of bringing the fact the whole lie of the international community and UN resolutions is really just a ploy to keep tension and conflict in the region.
No, I think you're completely right on that. I think, there's also something to be said with there are worse alternatives to this where you get the worst of both worlds,
Yes.
which is what the liberal status quo would have. Just these poor people being slowly destroyed through this massive war just from negligence, really, and this false optimism. The thing I worry about is if these people do get deported, in addition to everything else, that's going to stir up a lot of animosity towards the United States. And so not only do we pay for the houses, not only do we pay for the redevelopment, all because we're completely owned by this Israeli influence, but we also have to deal with the Palestinians then putting the blame on us for being displaced from their homes. So I think you're right on that. This does shake things up. Donald Trump is very good at doing that. The thing I worry about, though, is this does compromise the America First message. Hopefully, this stuff can get walked back and we can see a different alternative. But I think you're right. At least it did shake things up.